Welcome to Leipzig for this 918 job. This really is a fly on the wall style thing because it's a hectic day. There's a fair few journalists, we haven't got much time in the car. We've just had a presentation. This is interesting. I think we all suspected that when the P1 and the LaFerrari were launched, that Porsche would have to respond. Well, they have just responded because the claimed power figures for this car are as follows. From the internal combustion engine, 608 horsepower, and it revs to over 9,000. The total power figure though, this is mind-boggling, excuse my pieces of paper, 887 horsepower from a dry weight of 1,640 kilograms. The 918 has come to meet the other two somewhat in terms of performance. I think we're going to mill around a bit, we'll have a look at some of the technology in the car, because there's some lovely use of materials, there's some obviously pioneering technologies in there that we need to look at, and then hopefully we'll get a ride with Walter, who will show us how to drive the circuit at Leipzig, and then we get, I think, 3 laps. How can you tell anything in 3 laps? You probably can't, but do you want to be the journalist that says, no, I don't want to drive your car because I only get 3 laps? No, you don't. A hectic day, but hopefully a fun one. Some of the interesting stuff that's going on here. The dashboard, they felt the dashboard panel would be too heavy in aluminium. Say that yourself, too heavy in aluminium. Most sports car manufacturers boast about using aluminium. So what they've done is they've galvanized carbon fiber with metal. So effectively you've got this covering on carbon fiber. I mean, it's a freakish thing because you pick it up expecting the weight of aluminium and it weighs nothing. It's like light titanium almost. We've got a carbon fiber roll bar here, stabilizer bar. I mean, this stuff is expensive. It's also utterly beautiful to the touch. This is interesting. Obviously the car has a carbon tub, just like the Caro GT did 10 years ago and all the main rivals do as well. But a lot of the support points where you're hanging components from anything, engine, suspension, and a lot of the electrical gubbins that goes into the car, normally those support brackets are made of aluminium. So it's rather disappointing that you take a lovely light carbon structure and then attach this rather ugly, heavy aluminium bit. Porsche's using forced carbon, so there's a bit there. That's the equivalent to aluminium. There's definitely a weight reduction. It's not as profound as with the dashboard, but it just shows that they've tried to peel weight everywhere from this car, everywhere. But then you look at the headline figure, 1,640, and you think that's still quite a lump. I find this side of the car quite confusing, because I just keep saying to myself, well, take the bloody electric motor out of it then. Then it would weigh 1,100 kilograms, and we'd have 610 horsepower just from that lovely engine. Electricity seems to spoil sports cars. Anyhow, I'll get over that in a minute. Let's go over here.
The battery cells are vast and, for me, very controversial in a car of this type. They're lithium-ion with a nominal voltage of 385 volts, peaking at 430 volts.
That's 18 cells. This is perhaps here the key paradox of the 918. You have to lump these cells around, and doing so, you have to make incredible weight savings in other areas. So central to my argument's always been, make the incredible weight savings, don't lump these things around with you. They make good dumbbells though.
And there are dozens of other cool things going on in the 918. The 4.6 litre V8 is completely beltless with integrated oil pumps. Power output is 608 horsepower, augmented by the electric motors to make a total of 887 horsepower. Peak torque is over 920 foot-pounds, and from idle to 7,000 RPM there is never less than 590 foot-pounds available. The top exit exhaust is pure Inconel.
This is quite a strange event. We're now waiting to have a go in the car, but before that there's a chance of a ride with Walter Rall in a 4-litre RS. Watch this now. This is Walter demonstrating how to go around the circuit. A strange choice of car and person when you're trying to make your hybrid supercar or hypercar look really interesting, because the 4-litre RS is pounding around making a much better noise than the 19 Spyder at the moment. I think we're going to get 3 laps at most. It's soaking wet, and I'm led to believe that the car behaves like two-wheel drive when it oversteers. If they think I'm oversteering their £20 million development model, then I'm not going to. I'm slightly concerned, but we're going to get 3 laps, so it's better than nothing, isn't it?
Curb weight is now 1,640 kilograms, which given the mass of the battery packs is mighty impressive, but it's still a lot heavier than either the LaFerrari or the McLaren P1. The optional Weissach package shaves 40 kilograms from that figure. According to project chief Frank Walliser, the chassis calibration is 80% finished for the complicated torque vectoring system, and the powertrain is even closer to final specification. Active aerodynamics can open flaps in the front intakes and alter the rear wing angle to improve drag or downforce as required. And we also have some claimed performance figures. Sit tight everyone. 0 to 62 in 2.8, 0 to 124 miles an hour in 7.9, and 0 to 186 in 23 seconds dead. They look very brisk indeed, until you scrutinise the P1 and the LaFerrari. The P1 and the LaFerrari are both sub 3 seconds to 62 miles an hour. They're both sub 7 seconds to 124, and above that, it looks bad. Because the P1 is claimed to do 0 to 186 in 17 seconds, and the LaFerrari in 15.5. That's 15.5 versus the Porsche's 23 dead.
Okay, so I'm going to talk you through this. I'm in full electric mode, and I have... What sort of performance do I have? I feel like I have the performance of something like a Cayenne diesel. It's what it feels, or maybe a Panamera diesel. I put my foot flat down. God, the engine comes on. Too much, so that's the kick. Okay, how do I get it back to electric?
Just slow down.
Slow down? That's really clever, okay. So it's on the throttle?
Yes. The idea was having everything on the brake pedal, throttle.
So you don't need to play with the steering wheel? Yeah, okay, I get that. You know what, I can see why as an owner because if you drive the car regularly, you'll get used to it. Okay, that's clever. So, yeah, that's a good amount of performance. You could take care of ordinary cars with that amount of performance. And what's the maximum speed?
150 kilometers per hour.
So just over 90, 95 miles an hour. Okay, this circuit is flat and a little bit featureless, but I think we've found a little bit of rhythm there. Here's a little chicane here. Brake pedal, that's interesting. So it's a little bit Citroën in that you've got to get your foot down a little bit.
Now you go to hybrid.
Okay, so I click one more.
One click, then you're hybrid.
Now I'm hybrid.
You can go flat.
That's interesting.
This is only the combustion engine.
This is just combustion engine now.
Either combustion engine or electric motors. It's not combined.
Okay, so let's get car feels quite supple. It's got a lot of mechanical grip. Gearbox is quick. Steering is nice. Driving position feels unnatural to start with. So now we have full engine power and we have full electric power as well, yes? In sport mode. Fourth gear. Ooh. That's a lot of performance. It's a lot of performance. The brake feel is a bit funny coming into some of these turns. For continuity's sake, we've had to stop and change camera, so it's now a little bit greasy. But the performance it's big. It's bigger than I thought it would be as well. The handling, well, that's interesting because the car doesn't feel anything like as heavy as the claimed weight. It doesn't have the inertia at all. Steering's very direct. No, it's a very interesting car. Very interesting car. And the noise, well, miles better than when I first drove it. Miles better. Now this is the raciest mode of all. The tyre is really impressive. It's a special Michelin that has a kind of energy construction with a soft compound. And I have to say, that's one of the most impressive things about the car. And also it's interesting now, I've got a little bit of spots of rain coming, so I can feel the balance of the car. The torque vectoring, the chassis working hard. I mean, it's not a finished item yet, but wow. And now flat out. Listen to that. Woo-hoo-hoo! Better stop a bit earlier, I think we got the braking distance right then. We tip it in, we clip an apex. Oh yes. It's a mid-engine sports car. I think the most complimentary thing I can say is that when I'm pushing on,
It doesn't feel like I'm driving a hybrid sports car. It feels like I'm driving a mid-engine sports car because I'm not aware of the electric charge coming through. No, there's definitely stuff to be thinking about here. Okay, Frank, I want to just ask you some questions about the chassis because it's such a complicated chassis. If we're in race mode and I exit a corner, I'm in the exit phase and I'm in full power in second gear, 8,000 RPM on the motor, what percentage of what have I got going where in terms of if I had 880 horsepower available?
A roughly calculation of me is 15 to 20%
on the front
of the
axle.
total output is on the front axle.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. Is this new output that we've learned about today, is that a response to what we saw in Geneva from Porsche, from Ferrari and from McLaren?
No, this is not possible to do something in 2 months. It was always built in the car.
Yeah.
Maybe we have some competitors, and so I think it's better not to tell everything in the beginning. We tell the figures and the final numbers when we are sure, when we approved everything. This is now, and so we could just tell now the final numbers, not a reaction.
I found lots about the car really interesting and unexpected. One thing that I suppose, given that this is work in progress, we have to accept that this is not a finished car.
Not
and
finished.
it's quite something to be able to drive it before it's finished. The braking feels like this is something that's going to be, I'm sure you'll get it right, but at the moment we have a sort of slight step in the pedal.
Exactly.
And is this a calibration thing, or is this just actually physically getting the pedal to work?
It's not physically, it's just calibration.
Yeah.
This is the fine-tuning we talked about, what the car needs. If you have now the proper cars, wheels and everything, tires in the latest specification, then you can work on the fine-tuning to have the linearity that you need in the brake pedal. Because at the moment the step is not nice, but we're working on that, and it will be done for the final car.
How many control units are there in this car? How many individual boxes?
We count 55 in our architecture.
55?
55. Considering also a door control unit and the switch for the headlights, it's also a control unit.
And are they control units used by Porsche in other cars?
Yeah. We have on the chassis side we have some takeovers, like in the doors. We have, of course, for the engine it's new. For the PDK it's an existing control unit, but we're developing on the software side. The power control units are new in the software, and the battery management system. There we have a linkage to the Panamera plug-in hybrid. But there are also some new things like the control unit for the aerodynamics,
which is entirely new.
Yeah. From scratch.
This is not a question necessarily for you to answer, and I'm not trying to wind you up. Are there 918 people for this car? It seems to me that I can understand the reasons why Porsche is doing this project. There's so much to learn. There's so much technology that can be learned for future sports cars. For me, 918 is just too many.
It's 30% less than Carrera GT.
It's three times as much.
We did a lot of analysis for the markets, and if you compare it to Carrera GT, 10 years ago there was no Chinese car market. It has just grown up. It's 50 million units. Also super sports cars. We have wealthy people there. We have a total growth in the automotive market. I think 918 pieces is maybe not enough. We will have the demand will be higher, but we're happy to have it limited, and it's definitely for the first buyers a good choice. I no problem in selling these cars.
Okay,
Definitely.
You heard it there, boys and girls. It's been a really interesting day, and to get access to it so early has been fascinating.
Good to have you in the car.
Cheating physics. Cheers, man.
I'd be lying if I said a hybrid sports car which drives the way the 918 currently drives isn't profoundly impressive. It's a very, very clever machine. But even though I enjoyed driving it, I'm still sceptical. A Porsche hypercar should, for me, be the ultimate driving experience. End of. It shouldn't be hampered by technology unnecessary for the business of delivering the very best for the driver. Every time I stepped from the car, I was grinning madly. Then a few minutes later, I was thinking, what would it be like without all those batteries? You see, I see all of those intriguing weight-saving solutions, but I want to feel them in an 1100 kilogram package. But the biggest worry for Porsche must be the McLaren and the Ferrari.
They appear to have moved into a different performance territory by adopting Kerr's technology to reduce weight. In a marketplace dominated by ultimates, the 918, for all its mind-boggling technology, risks being the slowest hybrid hypercar in its class, and I think that's a big problem for Porsche.